So I want to talk tonight about SU carburetors. And you know, you've got a power plant underneath the bonnet, and the engine is how big? I mean, the engine's huge, right? I mean, it's great big thing. And that's fed by the carburetors, almost always dual carburetors, 75 to 80 US spec is just a single carburetor. Most of them prior to that are dual carbs. That's the best setup. And also the distributor. Now, the carburetors are as big as, well, I put my fist out and it looks almost the same size, but I mean, help me out. Carburetors at least as big as 2 fists, and there's 2 of them. The distributor is only as big as 1 fist, and there's only 1 of them. So before you do any carburetor tuning, make sure your engine's okay, and certainly make sure your distributor is okay. That's the joke in our trade, most carburetor problems are distributor problems. So the function of the carburetor is to turn, the function of the carburetor is to turn gasoline into gas, like we call it gas, but gas is liquid. We want to turn it into a vapor, right? And how much gasoline is supposed to be mixed with the air? Well, it depends. The faster you go, the higher this air piston climbs up, okay? The farther open that you make this throttle disc in the back, the more you open this up, the more air wants to go into the engine. And the air piston follows that air. There's a tapered needle on the bottom of that air piston. And there are, 400, 1,000 different needles for all the different carburetors made from 1925 through, 1980, all different Rovers and Jaguars and Wolseley Elfs, Riley Elfs and Wolseley Hornets and Austin Cambridges. And I mean, there are so many needles. And the workshop manual gives you the needle you're supposed to use for your car, your application. But of course, that's based on the gasoline that was available at the time. I have yet to find a set of new needle specifications to match modern fuel, but I've got a couple of comments about that later on. So anyway, this is a really simple carburetor. We've got 3 moving parts, basically. We've got the throttle disc, okay? And we've got the jet. This is an H or HS type. This is, in fact, an HS carburetor, but when you operate the choke, the jet drops. You can see the jet drop here. And if that jet drops far enough, you can start your car. It doesn't matter what the temperature is. If you were in Antarctica, you could start the car if this jet at the bottom drops far enough. So lots of people complain, oh, my car won't start. I got to do repeated starts on it and so forth. You get out and you have someone pull the choke cable out, and you look and you see how far that jet's coming down, and it really should come down. This is coming down a full ½ an inch, so if it does that, it'll start. And then the last moving part is the air piston. Now you can argue that there's a hinge inside the float bowl for the float and all that kind of stuff. There's a couple of the little bits and pieces that move here and stuff over here on the side that when you operate the choke, pushes the throttle open, so you increase your fast idle speed as the choke is pulled out. But basically, there's just 3 moving parts. So that makes it a really simple carburetor. What can go wrong? Just about everything. from 1968, this doesn't show it, but from 1968 through 1974, well, through 1980, including the Strombergs, there's a spring-loaded valve on this throttle disc, and it's to slow deceleration so that when you're running down the road at 60 miles an hour and you take your foot off the gas, so little air fuel enters the engine, it quits firing. I mean, the car's slowing down, but the engine's not firing. So what's going down the tailpipe? Raw air fuel. Government does not want raw air fuel going down the tailpipe. So they asked the manufacturers to figure out how they could slow deceleration. And they do that by putting this little spring-loaded valve, which is not on this one, but on the later ones. And it just means when you take your foot off the gas, you slow down slowly. If you want to make it feel like a sports car, you can either put in a solid throttle disc, as this is, or you can solder that valve shut. Makes it really nice. The shaft that goes through the carburetor here, the shaft wears. And so air is able to come in and get sucked in through the shaft on both ends. Now, to replace that, you need a piloted reamer and a mandrel to push in some bushings. So that's an exciting tool and stuff that is almost a one-time use. You might send your carburetor bodies out and have somebody else rebush them. The air piston can get dirty. And so even though you can pick up on it, it doesn't pick up evenly, or it falls poorly. And then over on the float side, you can have a float that gets perforated or worn. And so the float height, the amount of gasoline that sits in the float bowl, ends up being at the wrong height. So there's all kinds of stuff to do. Rebuilding carburetors is in your workshop manual. It tells you how to do it, tells you how to adjust. But one of the things that's interesting is the air piston. Here's the air piston here. Here's the suction chamber. When these were sold, they were sold as units because the clearance between the outside diameter of the air piston and the inside diameter of the suction chamber is a very, very tiny amount, a thousandth of an inch, something or other, and it's got to be really, really specific. Sometimes the inside of these will get all corroded. Maybe the carburetors have been off the car for a while and they got water in them, or they got old gasoline in them, and they can get really crummy. And you don't want to reduce the diameter of the piston or open up the inside diameter of the air piston very much, or it isn't going to float at the correct height anymore, and you're going to get a problem with your mixture. So during the rebuild, they ask you to do a drop test. So that's with these two items alone. There's no damper in the top, and there's nothing else on the piston. It's just like this. So they ask you to do a drop test. So I'm going to take a piece of masking tape, and I'm going to cover up the two holes. You see the two holes? You can see me through the holes. The two air bleed holes here at the bottom. I'm going to put this piece of masking tape across those holes so air can't bleed down through there. And then I usually take another piece of tape, and actually the workshop manual shows you using little tiny corks, pushing little tiny corks in there, but masking tape is cheap. So I'll put this on the tabletop, push down on it. Now that's a pretty airtight, that's pretty airtight on the bottom. And then we're going to put it into the suction chamber, and we're going to count the number of seconds it takes for this to fall out. You see it's very, very slowly. Now you've got two carburetors. You want each air piston to move down. I got my thumb here so it doesn't fall out. You want each piston to fall at the same rate. Now, a larger carburetor like this, the fall rate is supposed to be, 5 to 8 seconds or something or other. It's a relatively long time. But mostly what's important is that it falls at the same time. So I was talking to somebody the other day, and they had the damper in the top. They had oil in it, and they were talking about lift, and it was all mounted on the car and how fast it dropped. And I didn't argue with them. That's the wrong time to do that test. You do this test during the rebuild. This is a damper. And you'll see that there's a little valve here on the end that moves back and forth. So this fits into the dash pot. And the dash pot is filled with oil. And so you got a valve that goes into here, and the valve is constructed in such a way that it's almost impossible. You put some thick oil in here and you try to press this down in there, and it's like, it won't go. I mean, it's really, really tough. And yet it pulls up just perfectly. That has to do with how this valve is assembled. So every carburetor that there is has an accelerator pump. It has to have an accelerator pump because you have to enrich the mixture right at the point of acceleration. Our carburetors, in fact, don't have that accelerator pump. Instead, they've got this. So when you go to accelerate, this air piston, when you open up the throttle in the back from here to here, suddenly all that vacuum that's in the intake manifold is underneath the piston, and that piston would normally just pop right up, but you don't want him to pop up that fast because you want a richer mixture at acceleration. So that oil that's used in the dash pot here slows the upward motion of the piston. Well, the piston still gets to where it's going. It's going to get there in a second and a half rather than a quarter of a second. That's all. And that while it's down, while it's sitting lower than it normally would be, when it's sitting lower than the venturi, which is made up between the bottom of the air piston and what's called the bridge, that horizontal area that you can see. You can almost see me through it. But, that horizontal area, that's the venturi. And so by keeping it artificially low, the air rushing through there creates a great big vacuum, a lot more vacuum than it does when it's up here. If there's more of a vacuum, it's going to suck more gasoline out of the jet than it would normally. So I suggest to everyone that you use 90 weight gear oil in your carburetor. Now the workshop manual says use engine oil. Okay, all right. But that was 50 years ago. How many times has this air piston gone up and down on this valve? 30, 300, 3,000? 30,000, 300,000 times since the car was new? A lot. You know, every time you accelerate, it goes up and down. You know, it goes up when you're going faster. So what happens to the inside of the dash pot, or the steel cylinder on the inside of the dash pot? It enlarges. Well, wouldn't this wear? No, this holds dirt. This is softer. This is brass. This holds dirt and abrates the inside diameter. So the inside diameter here of the dash pot gets a little bit bigger, and the piston wants to rise more quickly than it should. So you can make up for that wear by using thick oil. Cheap trick.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
Hey, what if you don't have I have very low mileage carburetors. Would I use like a 50 weight, 40 weight engine oil then?
It says, the workshop manual says use engine oil, but I always use 90 weight on everything. And, you know, I mean, if you think it's impacting, that you don't like your acceleration from that, change it back. You know, all you gotta do is stick an oil can down in the top of this and just glug, and it'll flush most of that oil up and out. I mean, you can always take the suction chamber off and pour it out, or you can take a straw and inhale, but be careful.
Okay.
Too much oil in your mouth.
I might try that. I might try the heavier oil just to see.
No, just
Might
try
help it. Yeah, it might help acceleration.
it will change acceleration. It certainly will.
Nice.
Now, because of this change in gasoline, we got two things that have changed. We've changed the gasoline and we've changed the floats. Now, Joe Curto, he's the king of SU carburetors in Queens, New York. You want carburetor parts, you order them from Joe Curto, joecurto.com, C-U-R-T-O, Joe Curto. He is the man. And I mean, Moss, the stuff you order from Moss and other places is fine. Sometimes you actually get Joe Curto parts when you order from somebody else. But if you want the good parts, you get them from Joe. Right now, Joe's throttle discs are a little thick. They're a little hard to get through the shafts. I don't know if the shaft, the slit in the shaft is too narrow or his discs are too thick. One or the other. You got to finesse them a little bit. And there's always something going on. But let me tell you, the quality of his stuff is far and away a lot better than anyone else's, if there is possibly a difference. But he makes his own floats. And these floats are made out of, I don't know, something here. Let me, just a minute. They are made out of nitrofill. Okay, so does that mean that they sit higher or lower in the new gasoline or in the old gasoline? And then modern gasoline is cut with 10% alcohol, which means there's fewer BTUs per gallon. Dave Brown says that he's been moving the floats down because the fuel is lighter. I talked to a guy a month or so ago, and he had a problem at higher speed where it seemed like there was a wind against him, or he was pulling a trailer. You know, it's just the car just didn't, at constant speed. You put your foot down, you know, you get that acceleration. It's just fine. You have your foot into it, but just constant speed or up at just a slight incline. And he just said, man, this thing it just doesn't feel right. When I went over and over and over all the stuff that we might do, and he called me back and he said, you know, I incrementally increased the amount of fuel in the float bowl just a little tiny bit. He said, solved it right there. So you got two opposing opinions, but nothing's fixed. You can artfully work with all these things. The bottom line is, does the car run right at speed? And how do you know it's running right? Because you're running down the road at 60 miles an hour and you run for 5 miles and you've got a spark plug wrench with you and some gloves or rag protect you from the heat, and you pull out a couple of spark plugs and look at them. You know, are they bone white? Ooh, that's horrible. That's way too lean. You'll burn a hole in the piston. That's way too lean. Runs really hot. Maybe they're black, jet black, which means it's way too rich. Maybe they're the color of tan, like the color. I don't have just one hat. I've got a couple. Maybe it's tan, kind of like this, which is like perfect. Maybe that's the reason that I wear my hat like this, so I can compare spark plugs to it. Anyway, you're looking for this khaki color, this real light brown color, and it's also a way to tell if the carburetors are matched. If the front two spark plugs look different than the rear two, something's not balanced.
John?
Yes.
I got a quick, as long as you're talking about fuel,
Yes.
I've been using non-ethanol gasoline with a lead additive substitute. Is that what you would recommend?
I would, the non-ethanol gasoline is better for a couple of reasons. One is there are more BTUs per gallon, and it doesn't do as much damage. That alcohol can do damage to the inside of some of the carburetor parts, but the addition of that lead substitute, I think, this personal opinion, snake oil. Save your money, buy your wife some roses. You'll get more distance out of that than you will out of the lead additive. Tetraethyl lead is like phenomenally unhealthy. I mean, it's dangerous, it's poisonous. That's why they took it out of the gasoline. And so they replaced that with some lightweight volatile components that boil away pretty quickly. So within 6 months, sometimes you can't even get gasoline to start the car up. I mean, you know, gasoline sits in the tank. People who've got motorboats or snow blowers, lawnmowers, weed eaters, they complain about that. As you let it go for more than about 6 months, and it won't work. It will work if you get it going. Once you get the car going, it runs just fine when everything's hot, but it doesn't vaporize enough to get the car started. You can't choke it enough to get it started. But those volatile components were in there to raise the octane. And that's why you can't buy, you know, Sunoco 260 anymore, 110 octane, because you can't put enough volatile components in there. You can buy it in a can, or a bottle and pour it in the gas tank, but you've got to go out and drive that afternoon, because you put that much stuff in there. You take that stuff and you put it in a saucer and come back in a couple hours, it's gone. It's all evaporated. So that's why they can't hold it in the gasoline at the gasoline station. It just doesn't stay there. But the re-lead is just snake oil, so it doesn't do anything. The last couple of years of leaded gasoline, the fuel this is my understanding, the fuel companies were able to add phosphorus and call it lead. Indiana tried to change the value of pi to 3 because 3.1416 was too complicated. So you never underestimate the folly of any government, local or federal. Anyway, I don't think that re-lead stuff does anything. I'm open to hearing about it. I mean, the people who sell it obviously are going to make all this. When we lost the lead, everyone was sure that we wouldn't be able to drive our cars anymore. We've got 176 people on. We were sure we wouldn't be able to drive our cars anymore. The lubrication offered by the lead between the valve stem and the valve guide was gone. Didn't have that anymore. So everybody went to the phosphor bronze valve guides. Well, those are horrible. The clearance between a valve stem and a valve guide should be 0.5 thousandths. And to make these things work, you had to open them up to 2 thousandths, because when they got hot, they gripped the valve stem, and you could end up with your valve sticking open. No good there. And everyone was certain that there would be more valve rescission. Lead coated the seats, and they coated the face of the valve a little bit and helped conduct the heat in the exhaust valve into the cylinder head, into the seat, and then from the cylinder head into the water and there into the radiator. And everyone was certain that we would all suffer valve rescission, sucking a valve. And because the valves get so hot, I mean, how it all works anyway is absolutely amazing. I mean, when you look at the temperatures and you're pulling stuff out of the dirt in your backyard and refining it. You know, it's unbelievable how an engine works anyway. But it's like holding a cutting torch on those valves. I mean, it's just, and they run right at the edge of their ability. As it turns out, it was all so much scare. And most shops are back to using the cast iron guides again, because those are better. And there doesn't seem to be a problem with valve rescission, at least not if you've had your cylinder head off at least once, and they put valve seats into at least the exhaust valves. Intake valves don't get that hot, so there's no problem there. So anyway, save your money.
John, can you go back? Can you go back to the float level question for a minute? you said that if you're having problems, you might try effectively raising the float to get more gas into the float ball.
Yeah,
That means if you're adjusting, you're using a smaller rod spacer to adjust it. Does that make sense? I got that right?
yeah. So I brought my screwdriver. I was at my shop today working on the midget that I've had in my shop a little too long. That's today's understatement. And let me take matter of fact, this is a midget carburetor, not off that car, but it could be. Actually, these are real early midget carburetors. There's no up through 68. So let's take this guy, this float. We're gonna take this float. Here's the float. I mean, this is just like the back of your toilet. I mean, it's just exactly the same as your toilet. You know, it comes up and it shuts off the fuel flow when it gets high enough. So the idea is when you flip this guy upside down, I didn't do these carburetors, I gotta say that right away. There's this distance here between between the bottom of the float bowl and the top of the float. And this is all of 3/16 of an inch. The workshop, I gotta put this so you can see it here. This is hard to work in this thing backwards like this. I'm looking at trying to work in a mirror. There we go. So that gap right here is supposed to be 1/8 to 3/16 of an inch. But if you have some kind of problem where it's running too lean and you can't sort it out, your timing's correct, 32 degrees before, full mechanical advance, and your carburetors are set, so that so it idles correctly, then the only thing left is to change the float height so the float sits higher. Of course, I'm pushing it down, but it's going up so that you end up with more gasoline in the float bowl. Yes. I had one guy just in the past couple of months who because people call me up and they've got bizarre problems. That's why they call them. And I always say, well, please call me back and tell me what you did to solve the problem. And that's what he did to solve the problem. I had another guy who said that he couldn't stop it from leaking. This just vents through a hole underneath this little piece of aluminum. You got to have a hole in the top of the float bowl somehow, just to ventilate it. And he said, it's just spilling gasoline out. I said, well, take a screwdriver and beat it. I mean, you can beat it when it's jiggling gasoline out of there, usually because there's a little piece of dirt in there and that'll dislodge it. He said, I can't do anything. And I went over and over this stuff with him. And I said, call me back when you get a solution. And when you buy a kit, when you buy the kit to rebuild the carburetors, the needle and seat, which is down inside here, this guy down in here, it comes with a couple of little paper gaskets, real thin paper gaskets. I've never fit them. I've never fit them ever. And this guy said, I took mine out and I put those paper gaskets in, doesn't leak a drop. So I've started now always using the paper gaskets. But of course I get the needle and seat, I get the housing really tight against the aluminum. And sometimes when you're working at home, you don't want to break anything, so you get it as tight as you think it should be. But if it was me doing it, I'd get it a lot tighter. So anyway, he used those paper gaskets. So I've been using those ever since. Just because something was true in 1953 or 1958 or 1980, that's only 42 years ago, doesn't mean that it's correct now. So all the time we're changing. The flows are changing, the gasoline's changing. So anyway, what more? I didn't talk about centering the jet. Starting in 1969, the needle that comes off the bottom of the air piston is spring loaded. That's really nice. Then you don't have to center the jet anymore. You still have to make sure that there's not a problem, but you don't have to go through the laborious task of centering the jet. But prior to 1969, let me tell you, you've got to make sure that needle is absolutely centered when you assemble the carburetor. If you don't, the air piston won't move correctly and the mixture won't be correct. It's a really critical thing to do. So you see the size of the hole right in the center here. This is the later model that takes a spring-loaded needle. But the earlier ones, like this one, I'll take it apart, has a fixed needle. And when you go to tighten up the jet bearing, when I'm taking these two screws off here, these are the carburetors have got more, they have a greater variety of threads in them than almost anything else in the car. The engine has got metric threads for the spark plugs. It's like an A or a B engine. It's all American thread, or unified national fine, unified national coarse, with a couple little British standard pipe threads in it for fittings for the oil and the water. So this is a fixed needle. This is a fixed needle. And after you get this fixed needle in place, you should, if you can, put this in a drill and spin it and make sure that the end of this needle is absolutely true and it's not wobbling up and down. If it's wobbling, you can usually push it. It's just brass, it's really thin. You can push it and bend it so that it's right. When we're doing it on a lathe, when I'm doing it on a lathe, and if it's bobbing up and down, I just take a screwdriver and tunk, and it's either better or worse, and tunk, it's better or worse, and tunk, and it's great. So you just leave it, you just do it randomly, but you can do it more carefully than that too. The real early pistons in the T-types were brass. Oh, those look real nice when you polish them up. You don't polish these up here because you don't want to corrupt the distance between here and the suction chamber. You can polish them all up underneath. Then later on, they had a steel insert, a steel ring inside here to give you mass so that you use the Earth's gravity, to pull this thing down. And then someone said, well, you know, rather than fiddle around with all that, why don't we just put a spring on it, because we're after a certain amount of force. And so there's a bunch of different types of springs. There's a bunch of different types of carburetors. The earlier ones are H-type, which stands for horizontal. Which does that mean there are V carburetors? I haven't seen one. Joe Curto would know. The earlier ones are the H-type, and then we go to the HS carburetors, which are the horizontal short body, because like on a TD or a TF, this body is that much longer. This is a horizontal short body. Then we go to the horizontal integral float, where the float bowl is moved on the bottom side of the carburetor. It's cheaper to make, but if there's a problem with a leaking needle and seat, oh my gosh, you got to take the carburetor off the car to sort it out. And then there are HD carburetors, horizontal diaphragm. And there's a diaphragm at the bottom of the jet. Those are slick. Those are usually huge carburetors. The smallest ones I've ever seen are 1 3/4 inches. They were used on the Farina Magnet, the Mark III and Mark IV MG magnets, 59, 60, around there. And but they're almost always larger carburetors. The carburetors are designated for the size of the carburetor by the distance of the throat, right here. And you start at 1 inch. So an HS, well, I don't think they're H1 carburetor is 1 1/8 in diameter. This is an HS2 carburetor. So that's 1 inch plus 2/8. So it's 1 1/4 carburetor. Then an MGB is an HS4 or an HIF4. So that's 1 4/8 or 1 1/2. Then TRs, MGCs take H HS 6s, 1 3/4. And then the big carburetors are like HD 8s. So that's 8/8 of an inch over an inch. And I think there's some carburetors that are a little bit bigger than that too, maybe some HD 10s or something on Rolls Royces or something. But they're all relatively the same. They use all the same kinds of parts. And I started to wax on about the threads. So up here, these screws that go on the top, the AUC 1358s, those are 3/16 Whitworth. The thread on the adjuster nut down here on the adjuster nut that you can adjust here. That adjuster nut, that's a British Standard brass thread. That's 26 threads per inch. The thread that goes into the bottom down here for the jet bearing, that might be BSF. I think it's BSP, British Standard pipe thread. And then the little tiny screws, the adjuster screws, those are BA thread, British Association. These are 4BA screws. So there's a bunch of different threads on there. So if you lose something, it's tough to go to the hardware store and just get something that works. Although I've seen wood screws screwed into all kinds of places. I mean, you can always make a screw work, you know, but oh my gosh. So just be careful when you got this stuff apart. To make a suction chamber look nice and pretty like this, you can almost see yourself in it. I put it on a lathe. I've got a mandrel. So I put it down through the middle and spin it pretty fast. And I start off with 100 paper, then I go to 180, then 360, and then like 800, and then maybe I end up at 2000 paper. By that time, I've got a can of water out because the paper clogs up too much. And when that gets done, I carry it over to the buffing wheel and buff it out. So that's what makes it look so nice. The bodies themselves, I know Dave Brown he doesn't tumble them. He uses some kind of vacuum blast. I can't remember what. These have been vacuum blasted. I'm not exactly sure what that is, but look at this. It looks like it's, you know, brand new. I use a tumbler. I sandblast them all first and then stick them in one of those vibratory tumblers. You gotta use the right fluid. If you just use your wife's Prel or some dishwashing detergent or something or other, they invariably come out black. I don't know what the stuff is. I know exactly what the stuff is I use. Is like L487, available from a sandblasting shop here in town. I don't know what's in it, but I know that there was a guy in Oklahoma, I think it was Oklahoma, Jim Taylor, who did carburetors for a long, long time. And he passed away, and Bob Johnson now in Oklahoma has taken over his business. And I know that that's the system that they use, tumbling, because they bought a 5-gallon pail of the stuff from my supplier here in Grand Rapids. You don't need much of it. But at home, it's hard to do it. You know, you spray carburetor cleaner and a soft stainless steel brush, and you brush and you brush and you brush. But you know, to get this kind of finish on it, you've got to tumble it.
Pardon me for interrupting, John.
What's that?
Pardon me for interrupting. I believe the process that you described earlier was called vapor blasting.
Yes.
And it's essentially a glass bead or a sand blast that's carried by a fluid.
Okay.
So just
Thank
trying
you.
to clarify. Yeah.
So yes, I always talk about sandblasting, but what kind of media are you blasting? So one guy the other day says, well, we use glass. And I said, well, help me out, in glass sand. I mean, anyway, so it's all you can get 1,000 different things to shoot at these things. You can put them into a tumbler with walnut shells. There's all kinds of things you can use to make them look nice. I don't know what it costs right now to have a set of carburetors rebuilt, but it's you know, to do a job like this stuff is all zinc plated. You know, this has all been zinc plated. You know, I mean, this thing looks brand new, and it was just a POS when it came into a shop to do. I've got it because there's some stuff wrong with it. But
And while you got that up in front of us, the workshop manual and all my buddies and friends who's supposed to know all about this stuff say to, when you're setting the mixture, turn the nut counterclockwise to do one way and clockwise to do the other. And they never say whether that's looking down at it or looking up at it.
yeah,
Put your finger over that and tell me which way makes it leaner.
when you take a look, when you operate the choke and the jet drops, it makes it rich, right?
Got it.
So that's when you unscrew this, it pushes it down, it makes it rich. When you screw it up, it makes it lean.
You just answered my question. Thank
Okay.
you so very much.
So this is a British standard brass thread here at the bottom. And I said that's 26 threads per inch on this adjuster nut here at the bottom. So that means that at 26 threads per inch, you get about 40 turns to get you 1 inch, which means that each turn is a 1/40th of an inch, which means that each flat is like 6/1000ths of an inch. I mean, it's a real fine adjustment. And the new carburetors that are made by Berlin Fuel System, some of the parts are not exchangeable, and the jet bearing here, which means that it bears the jet, it's got an even finer thread on it. So I can tell you that when you're setting carburetors, and matter of fact, I'll talk about that. When you go to set the carburetors, having this thing one flat one way or the other makes a difference. So how do you know? You know, how do you do it? 4 steps. 4 steps. First of all, you've got to use a unison, or I use a tube, just a piece of 1/2-inch heater hose, and I listen to the suction through both carburetors, this one and the other one, right? This one and the other one, and they're going. So, but I'm used to it. If you're not used to it, or you got hearing loss, that ain't gonna help. So you use a unison on the front. It's got a little moving ball, or there's a bunch of different ones you can use. But you've got to, the first job is to get the air through the carburetor, moving the same amount of air through there. And you do that through the adjuster screw up here. And crank it up, crank it down, so that both carburetors are drawing the same amount of air. Then the second step is you want to make sure that the mixture is correct. Now, all this does is get the mixture correct at idle, but because of the way the needle's arranged and all that sort of stuff, that means that it's supposed to be running correct at high speed. You can't adjust it at high speed. You can't hang over the fender when you're running down the road at 60 miles an hour. You can't do it. So it's only by setting it here. This is like lying on a table for an electrocardiogram. I mean, you're not under stress, you know, so it only tells you what your heart's doing at rest, which is helpful if there's some big problem, but it doesn't cover the whole thing. That's why they got the treadmill. So you adjust this so that the mixture is correct. When you adjust one carburetor and get it correct, then you've got to go over to the other carburetor and get it correct. That in turn may cause this one to be a little not correct anymore. And as you begin to approach the correct mixture, the car is going to run faster. This is going to run more efficiently. So it may be that you adjust it so it's idling at 800, 900, whatever, wherever you want it to idle. I mean, you want it to idle at 1500, you can have it idle there too. But 800, 900, that's a pretty common figure. And so you get them idling at 800, and then you start to move the adjuster nuts down here, and pretty soon you're idling at 1200. So you got to go back to step one, set the idle back down. Now you can turn this adjuster screw. If you turn it a half a turn or a quarter of a turn, an eighth of a turn, you turn each of them the same amount. But after you've made maybe 3 or 4 adjustments, time to check the airflow again. So how do you know that you've achieved the right mixture? Well, that needle on the bottom, this tapered needle on the bottom of the air piston, you want to make sure that the jet's in the right, let me get this thing spun around. Make sure that the jet's in the right position. And you can use this piston lifting pin on the side of the carburetor. Oh, let me get it around. This is like working in a mirror, let me tell you. You can use this, okay? And you can lift the air piston. You have to lift the air piston to check the mixture. What I prefer to do is take a screwdriver and put it down the throat and turn the screwdriver. And that way, you know that you're working each carburetor the same amount. So when you lift this air piston, it leans the mixture. When you lift the air piston up, the vacuum, you lose the vacuum at the venturi, and the mixture leans. So when you artificially lift the piston into an unnatural position, you lift it up an incremental amount. I mean, the workshop manual says move it, I don't know, 3/16 of an inch. Are you kidding me? The whole engine's shaking and 3/16. Anyway, you move it as little as you can and judge the change in RPM. Now, if the RPM goes up, 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 it's way too rich because you're leaning it out and it's making it run faster. So you got to adjust this guy up. If, on the other hand, as you just begin to jiggle the position of this piston, the RPMs fall off, it's already too lean, and you're making it leaner and it's running worse. What you're looking for is when you just disturb the position of this piston by lifting it ever so slightly, is you want to see the RPM rise about 50 and then fall away. You want to rise 50 and then fall away. So if your ear is good, you can hear it. If you've got what they call a moving coil tachometer, which means it's got a needle on it, you can see it. You can't see it on a digital tachometer. It looks like a gasoline pump rolling and scrolling, and you can't keep track of what's going on. But if you got one with a needle, you can go on eBay and find an old tack dwell on there and hook it up, and you watch it, and you're looking at the needle will deflect maybe 50 RPM. It's impressive to see it. So you got one's just perfect. Now you go to the other one and you get him perfect, and you come back and check this guy and he's too rich or too lean. So you make some incremental changes. So now the airflow is the same through each carburetor, and when you lift the air piston on each carburetor, it causes the RPM to change at the same rate. Right? So now all we have to do is make sure that when you go to operate the choke, see if I can do this. See, when you operate the choke, see how it moves the throttle? I mean, I'm trying to hold this all still, but it moves. See how it moves the throttle? You can see it. You can see the throttle here rotating. So you want, and that's controlled by the screw, an adjuster screw down here at the bottom, the screw here. You want to make sure that when you pull the choke cable out, that both carburetors continue to pull the same amount of air, that they're matched, that they're both drawing the same amount of air. So you pull the choke cable out until the car runs the fastest. Whether you're pulling it out 1/8 of an inch or you're pulling out 2 inches out of the dash, you pull it out until it runs the fastest, and then adjust both carburetors so they're drafting the same amount of air and that it's running at, say, 1600, 1800 RPM. That's easy. Lastly, on the HS carburetors and the HIF, I didn't bring them with me. There's these interconnecting links, these shafts that go from one carburetor to the other. They nestle into these reliefs inside these nuts. They got these little fingers on them, and that's what controls the opening the throttle or not. MGAs and T-types, we've got those accordion shaped jobs between them. You don't have to worry about this step, but here you do. And when you go to open the throttle, you pull up on the cable, on the throttle cable, and you just begin to pull it up. You want to make sure that both carburetors open at exactly the same time. You've taken all this time to make sure everything's just exact. There's no point in having one carburetor open up, 10 degrees, and then the second one starts to open up. You want them to open at the same time. That's it. That's it. There's only 4 steps: airflow, mixture, fast idle, and the interconnecting links. So it shouldn't, geez, it shouldn't take you more than, 10 minutes or so just to settle in. Car's got to be hot. It's got to have fresh gasoline in it. The distributor has to be correct, which means 32 degrees before top dead center, full mechanical advance, vacuum disconnected. That's a figure that's true from 1946 through 1980, except the V8s and the twin cams. All the rest of them, 32 degrees before, full mechanical advance. Now you can set it at 13 degrees before at 1500 RPM or whatever the workshop manual says, but let me tell you, with an old distributor, you don't know where it is at high speed, and that's where you're asking the engine to produce the most amount of energy. Is at high speed. That's where it's got to be correct. So that's why you want it to be correct all the way up there. And you got to have a dial back timing light in almost all of our cars, because there's only 3 or 4 fingers available to get the timing right. So okay.
Hey,
Hey,
John,
John? Oh,
Yes.
sorry.
Oh, I was going to ask, I'm sorry, am I
No,
interrupting?
go ahead.
well,
You're on.
I have a rough idle situation at low RPM, and I was wondering what your procedure would be to try to identify a vacuum leak, because I think that's my issue.
Oh, that's easy. I didn't even get there. So you can have vacuum leaks around the shaft. You can have vacuum leaks on the, around the gaskets. You can have on the manifold, between the manifold and the engine. They can be anywhere. So you get a can of spray carburetor cleaner with, I didn't bring one, with a little nozzle that comes out of the end. And while the car's idling, you spray it between the head and the manifold, the heat shield, and the spacer blocks, and carburetors, around the carburetors, around all the fittings on the intake manifold. If you've got a 75 through 80 MGB, spray it between the master cylinder and the brake servo. Wherever the leak is, if there is a leak, it'll suck that carburetor cleaner in and change the idle. Might make it go up, might make the idle go down. You don't know which, but that's how to find it. Now, a couple other people wanted to ask a question too.
Oh, John?
this is Benny Cummings.
I'll go with Tom Weisel. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there more cable pull available to you on the choke knob, or are you restricted by the amount of extension on the I want to make my choke pull down the jet
You got
longer.
you got MGB, right?
76, yeah, with twin carb.
Yeah, well, it should come out about that far.
Is the carburetor restricting how far that can come out?
Yes, yeah, because you've got this guy here. I mean, you've got this guy here, which only moves so far, right?
That was my question. Yeah.
Yep, and so you can disconnect the cable from the carburetors and operate the carburetors by hand and say, oh my gosh, this one isn't moving, or what's the problem, or does it need oil? And everything needs oil. Oil is your friend. Just oil and lube, everything. It's hardly ever the cable itself that's faulty. But when you always use a T handle, never buy a round handle. You can't get your fingers on it. Get a
I've got the T,
Yeah.
and these are fairly new carbs. I just wanted to make it start quicker in the cold weather.
Yeah,
That's the
well,
only-
if you can get that jet to drop deep, far enough down, it'll start
Yep.
instantly. And sometimes it's just like, oh my gosh, I was afraid I was going to pull it apart. Just pull it harder, I mean, that's a solution too. So, Mr. CACMO, CACMO, you've tried to
Yeah,
weigh in
okay.
a couple of times.
Yeah, so this is Ben Cummings in Mobile. So I bought the Color Tune
Mhm.
to assist me with adjusting the richness or leanness. Is that thing any good, or is it, or did I get cheated when I bought that thing?
No, it's kind of gimmicky, but what it will tell you is if you're like number 2 and your number 3 cylinders are firing the same. The problem with the Color Tune, which is easily surmountable, is they tell you to adjust your carburetors until you get this nice blue flame, like you'd expect from natural gas on your range in your kitchen. It's red. It's really red. It's really rich. Our cars idle rich. They love to idle rich. So if you try to go for what Color Tune says is correct, this is a Color Tune that I looked at 30 years ago in the instructions. What I would use it for is to make sure that the front carburetor is doing the same as the rear carburetor. So, but it's kind of gimmicky. You don't need it.
We used it about 3 years ago on my MGB, and just like you said, we could never get the air color. The car was running great, and maybe that works on a Ford. I don't know.
It's just, if they only said MGs, MGs should be red, then you'd be home free, right? So, yeah. But if you're way off, it'll tell you. But you can tell that by lifting the air piston. So.
John, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, absolutely. Rory, go ahead.
Quick question is about front brakes. We'll change it up a bit.
Sure.
I had my engine rebuilt, and at the same time, I had my front brake pad replaced. My front pad's on a 1967 MGB, so it's front discs. What I'm noticing, and I've seen a lot of posts on forums about dreaded brake squeal. So what I'm finding is I'll drive for a couple of minutes, and the brakes will start to squeal. So I've done the copper, I've done a whole bunch of stuff, and I guess what I'm getting at is there a set of brake pads, a make or manufacturer that you like? Because I assume it's vibration.
I haven't used these yet, but Bob, you can weigh in. Bob's got his favorite ones.
I go
All right.
to AutoZone, buy Duralast. Now there's two. There's Duralast and Duralast Gold. I just buy the Duralast. Lifetime warranty. They've never squealed, and I only had to buy one set of pads because they will replace them when they wear out.
Fantastic. Okay.
And
Appreciate that.
they're like $14, $15, maybe they go up a little bit, but
I'm in Canada.
they don't
So,
squeal.
so probably the exchange rate is about $80 the way the Canadian dollar is going. But yeah, I appreciate that. Appreciate that. Thanks.
It's worth it to get rid of the squeal.
Okay. So basically it is the pad. I was wondering if it was a vibration issue. I really couldn't quite.
It is a vibration, like a musical vibration, right? I mean, that's how all musical instruments work, is a vibration, but you don't want it. It's
I don't
like-
want those harmonics. It's embarrassing. Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, and the other stuff, that you can buy the goo to put on the back. You can get silicone and let that seal, anything to dampen that. We used to just take duct tape on the back of the pads, but that was back in the day when the pads didn't sing very much at all because they were
Yeah.
still, they were still asbestos pads.
Yeah,
But now
so that's
there's
what it
a
is.
whole bunch of different pads out there with all
Okay.
kinds of claims.
John,
Bob
Yes,
says Duralast Gold is good. Thanks, Bob, too.
John, this is Walter. I've found very good luck with the TRW brake pads
Oh,
for
okay, thank you.
for brake wheels.
okay.
I've been through about 6 different sets of pads recently,
Oh my gosh.
and found that the TRW ceramic pads have the least tendency to squeal.
Great, appreciate that. Thanks, Ben.
You're welcome.
I'm gonna write this down because I tell you, I mean, like, I answer tech questions a lot, but 80% of the questions are the same group, and one of them is brake squeal. Another problem that a number of people, I have received 5 people who've caught 5 so far who bought new calipers, and the new calipers throw the pads. Now, they don't throw them out of the car, so you're still braking. They throw them forward towards the center of the hub, and so that you get all the scraping, because you look down there and here's the pad all kittywampus in there and everything. I mean, the pad doesn't leave the vehicle, or else you'd lose your brakes altogether. But that's from the new, some of the new calipers. Don't know, it's always, my contention is always that any original part rebuilt is better than any new part. You can't do that with brake pads. You can't, you can reline shoes. We got a place here in town that's still, well, last time I went there, 5 years ago, maybe they're still relining brake shoes, but you can't get them to reline a brake pad. So do I have any more questions on carburetors?
Just a quick one. Were you going to consider doing the same for Strombergs at some point? Just
Sure.
wondering about the adjustment, like the larger
sure.
yellow adjustment and small one.
Yeah, sure. I mean, just briefly, because it's easy enough. Here, we adjust the position of the jet to achieve some magic combination between the hole, which is the jet, and the tapered needle, right? But in the Stromberg 75 through 80, the jet stays in the same place. It's the needle that moves up and down. So you need that $10 tool, the 1/8-inch Allen wrench with a barrel around it to hold the air piston. Otherwise, you'd tear the diaphragm. And then when you screw it clockwise, it draws the needle up and makes it rich. Clockwise is rich. Every hour that goes by, you ought to have more money in the bank, right? I mean, clockwise is rich. You got to use some stupid little ditty to remember that. But sure, I'll bring us. We'll do one maybe next time. We'll do a Stromberg because it's the same carburetor. It's a CD, a constant depression. A constant depression.
It's very telling.
yeah, it's the
John?
same thing, only that it uses a diaphragm, and it sounds like a safe sex ad, but always carry an extra diaphragm, because I mean, you can buy another headlight, you can buy a headlight at Walmart, 6014 headlight, but you cannot get another diaphragm. Although, who told me? Was it Cecilia from Scarborough Fair? She said, well, just take a nitrile glove, poke a couple of holes in it and stick that in, and just make it work. So you can get home, but yeah, that diaphragm is important. Always have an extra diaphragm in the car, in the glove box.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Any more questions about the SU carburetor? Skinner's Union?
I have one last question.
Yes.
I noticed that when I was rebuilding my HS4s for my 68 MGB GT, that I was having difficulty getting the linkages that draw the jets downward for choking to run smoothly. And I noticed that some of the holes that hold it all together are elongated. Are
Okay.
replacement parts available for those, or what would you do about that?
Watch this one real carefully, and you'll see that the the strap moves far before it starts to move the air piston. There's supposed to be a little washer in there. You can make out of a ferrule, a little, I've made them out of a piece of 1/8 inch tubing before in there. And then the other thing that those linkages love is oil. If you just oil them up, it'll make all the difference in the world. And the angle that this guy takes here, the flatter the angle, if you squish this in, then the farther it's going to drop when you operate it. Okay. So the tighter the angle, the less it's going to drop. But if you flatten this out a little bit, you can get this thing to drop down that 1/2 inch. So.
Okay.
I made new grommets at Joe Curto's suggestion out of shoelace grommets from Michael's craft store.
Okay. Okay. There's always a way to solve it. Thank you.
John, could
John,
you
this
speak a
has
little
been
bit
Cummings.
about the HIF4?
Yes.
adjustments?
Okay. All right. So I didn't bring along in HIF. So that we're still moving the jet. We're still moving the jet, but the jet's inside the float bowl. And we never, we move the jet to adjust it, but we never get the jet to drop like it is here. There's actually another circuit altogether drilled through the carburetor body with a rotary valve on it. Instead, you've got a screw that comes in, from the front on the bias, and as you turn that clockwise, it makes it rich. Clockwise is rich. So it's the same idea. You start it up, you get the airflow right, and then once it's warm and you're all set to adjust it, you put your screwdriver down the throat, turn the screwdriver just a little tiny bit, and get the air piston to rise, and judge the change in RPM just the same way. There's another way that's shown in the workshop manual how to do it. But it's just easier if you lift the air piston. But maybe next time I'll bring an HIF carburetor too, and just because that's got more. It's the way the stuff's set up, the float bowl and the linkages and so forth is different. So.
John, do you have any experience with the dry seal jet bearings that Berlin is selling now?
For an H-type carburetor?
Yes, to replace the cork seals.
I've seen a couple of them in the past, and they're always that. It seems like a wonderful idea, like nitrile O-rings. I mean, oh my gosh, but they don't work.
Yeah.
They don't work. So I don't know until I don't know.
Nor do I.
I'd wait till the jury's in, till there's a couple years of experience on those. I have heard of them maybe once or twice, but I haven't run a shop for 5 years. So there's some new stuff that's out there that I have no experience with. You can call Glenn at Glenn's MG Service in St. Petersburg, Florida, or Paul Deershaw at Sports Car Craftsman in Arvada, Colorado. But don't chew up too much of their time. They both have 10 employees, and they're both screaming to get stuff done. So.
Yep, I used to be a shop owner. I understand. Thanks, John.
John.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I just joined late, and maybe this has already been covered, but I'm putting in some new solid discs in my butterflies in my HIF 4s.
Okay.
And there's a bevel on it. Which way does the bevel go?
You just have to look and see what makes the most sense. Okay, there's a bevel, and if you get the bevel backwards, it just won't close correctly.
Okay,
So-
right. So I think I've got it right, but yeah, the bevel goes right along the plane of the,
Now, when you put those in, make sure that you back your idle screw all the way off.
okay,
All the way off, so there's nothing holding that open artificially, because when this thing closes, I mean, it's not a perfect seal, but let me tell you, I mean, that when you're looking through here, you can only see I don't know, even if you can see a glimmer, a ray of, I don't think you can, a ray of light around there. So it should be, you hold it up to a light and you should see very, very little around. I mean, whatever you see is whatever you see, but did you rebush those carburetors, those HIFs?
no, I didn't.
Okay.
I was going after the jets were wrong. I had a black jet and a red jet.
100,000 jet?
I'm sorry. Well, the jet is the movable piece on the bottom, right?
Right.
I had a black one and a red one.
Okay.
And the red was about 100 thousandths longer than the black one. And it
Yeah.
wouldn't tune.
There's these carburetors were used on Volvos, lots of different cars, and every now and then they come through packaged wrong. It's like buying a handbrake cable. There's like, I don't know, 8 or 10 different handbrake cables throughout the whole MGB range.
Right.
Wire wheels, disc wheels up through 67, 68 through 74, 70, just rubber bumper. They all look the same. You really got it in, you just wouldn't expect. Anyway, yeah, good for you that you found that out.
So that's when I got the parts from Joe Curto and they suggested the discs and it just kept going. So, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
And make sure you splay those screws.
Oh yeah.
That's real embarrassing to have those. I don't think, can you see?
I can see. You can see it. Yeah.
Yeah. The real embarrassing to have those walk back out. I mean, if it goes into the cylinder, it gets chewed up and spit out real fast. But then the throttle disc jams.
Okay. Right. You're wide open. Hey, thank you.
You're welcome. Well, here we are at 8:22. I can't believe we've talked an hour and a half about carburetors. We've talked a lot more about them too. I wish I'd had my normal stuff. I want to start going through the chat section and see what we've got. It says there's 48 new messages on chat. We're not going to get through them all. But let me make my pitch while I take a drink of water here. To go on my website, please, and take and look at what's available. There's stuff on there. There's forms and so forth. And if you want to get your buddy or somebody else in your club to get on my mailing list to get the emails about this session, these sessions, there's a thing at the top on the top ribbon that says join our newsletter. But what I'm talking about is the little yellow PayPal button that says help John afford his retirement. So we're going to start off here. Judd, we had snow here Saturday. Judd's from South Carolina. I had to put up the passenger side of my MG8, the passenger side curtain. So
the tonneau cover. Just pull the tonneau up.
Oh, all right. Okay.
Anyway, you said you had snow, and I'm always talking about how wonderful it is to drive all winter.
Yep.
It was wonderful.
All right, Eric Gebhardt, I'm putting 52 TD engine back together. When I put the distributor in, the rotor pre-turned. The next night when I went back to work on it, it seems to be fine. Thought. It wasn't set all the way down in, and then at night it slid down into place. I mean, it's gear driven. I mean, it's Eric, that's just, it's, I don't know. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of. I mean, as long as your cam is
not long enough that if it's not long enough to go past the cam gear, correct?
No, it isn't. Hey, I'm gonna hit mute all because I got some background noise here. So there, okay, Eric, you can unmute yourself again.
So it must not have been down far enough, I guess.
That would be my guess. Yep. So on a TD, you roll it around to top dead center with number 1 firing. Both the rockers are loose. Number 1 and 2 rockers are loose. And you put it in so that the rotor's pointed at 6 o'clock. That's the way it's supposed to be. It doesn't matter where it is, as long as the wire from that side of the cap goes to number 1. But conventionally, the number 1 exits the cap at 6 o'clock. So.
Hey, John.
Yes.
Tom Custer here.
Yeah.
Hey, you skipped over my question, so I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay.
Okay. I don't know if you can read it there, but I finished the gearbox. I'm almost finished with it, but I want to know how to remove and replace the steel ring and the oil seal in the speedo housing.
Yeah. So do I. There are these pliers that when you that are serrated on the outside, and when you tighten them up, they go out and they can grab. But I don't think I've been successful more than once or something. I don't know how to get that to turn in there. And that I don't know. I just leave it. I don't think it'll leak.
Okay, I think that's what I'll do. I'll just leave it. Okay. Thanks, John.
Yeah, you're welcome. So, okay, let's see. Steve, it looks like Illis. I'm being told on another MG site that underhood heat can cause vapor lock condition. Any truth to that? When my MG idles at a light, it does this. It gets vapor locked. So Steve, are you still on? Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, I'm here, John.
Okay, so what kind of MG do you have?
I have a 1980, but it has the twin SUs on it.
Okay, well, it could be that it's getting so hot underneath there, it's boiling the gasoline. That's not exactly vapor lock, but it's the bottom line is that was the car speed up, slow down, or quit?
Not while I'm driving it normally, no, but if I'm sitting at a traffic light, it sits and idles for a period of time. Then when I step on the gas to go, it just seems like there's nothing there. Now I'm sure there has to be gas there with the electric fuel pump. It should be keeping the bolts.
Yes. Yeah,
I would think.
Yeah, there's gasoline in the float bolts. That's not the problem. Put 90 weight in your carburetors. And remember, we're all seduced by these cars with computers that run perfectly, whether it's 32 degrees or minus 32 degrees or 106 degrees. They all run perfectly because they always idle at the same speed and everything. So if you're having that problem, just rev it up while you're sitting there so that you don't.
Yeah, I've done that, and that kind of helped, but these other sites are telling me that heat in the distributor, I don't know what that has to do with anything, but it said heat in the distributor is causing this problem. These guys are putting little fans under there and everything. And I don't know what they're smoking or what, but I don't really see how that putting a fan in there is going to really help anything.
I don't know what kind of carburetors you've got, but on HS carburetors, Joe Curto sells these socks. They're not asbestos, nothing's asbestos, but it looks like an asbestos sock that goes around here and keeps the heat off the float bowl.
Okay.
And that's one good way. I'm sure it's fuel vaporization. And
that's what I was thinking that, but I had asked this question once before a long time ago, and the guys on here did say that SU carburetors don't vapor lock. So I thought, okay, fine. Now I did re-insulate that metal plate between the intake and the carburetors. I bought some insulation material and I riveted that on. That kind of helped a little bit, but we do have a couple of traffic lights in my area here that seem to take forever for you to get the green, and that's about the only time. Or if I go into a store, if I shut it off, go in the store, buy something, come back out, then it'll start, but it doesn't want to go.
Not until you get some cool gasoline on the float bowls. So
Right.
you've got it somehow, there's three ways of heat transfer: conduction, convection, and radiation. It's not conduction, that's not the problem. It's probably not radiation off the exhaust manifold, although maybe a little bit, because you said you put that asbestos stuff on the heat shield and that seemed to slow it down. Mostly it's convection. It just gets so friggin' hot underneath there. And modern gasoline boils. So if you go on your cell phone, where's my cell phone here? You go on your cell phone and there's an app you can get for pure gas, pure-gas.com. And if you buy gasoline that hasn't got ethanol in it, that problem will disappear, I'll bet.
Okay, so up until that time, I just have to sort of grin and bear it.
Yep, just keep it revved up. Yep.
Well, I can do that. I can do that. All right, thank you.
Yeah, George.
Yeah, a friend of mine had an issue very similar to that. Can you hear me all right? Yeah, and he had a set of aftermarket headers on there with no insulation on them, and he was cooking underneath there.
Oh yeah. All headers are noisy. All headers are hot. All headers leak. All headers are headaches. Get rid of your headers and put a factory exhaust manifold on it, yeah. Or wrap the headers.
Unfortunately, this has a header on it. And I considered putting that wrap on the header because I was thinking, well, maybe that's the heat's coming up from there. And I was looking at getting the wrap to put on the header.
Oh, what a hassle that to do a nice job.
Yeah, it looks like a pain in the butt, but that's why it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. So, yeah, if you can find a factory exhaust manifold with a factory front exhaust pipe, you'll be a whole lot happier. So, okay.
Hey, John?
Yes, Crystal.
Any thoughts or what's your opinions on having the exhaust header ceramic coated inside, outside from a company called Jet Hot?
Jet Hot, that does cut down on some of the radiation that you can get off the manifold. Jet Hot coating, of course, you got to take the manifold off. If you can take the manifold off, then get a factory manifold, but you can have that Jet Hot coated. Yeah, there is Jet Hot coating, and that's a trade name, Jet Hot coating, and it makes it look real nice too. You can get it in a rainbow of colors. You can have them pink if you want. But
I had both my exhaust and the intake manifold both done in cast iron because I was worried about that, because of the one conversation.
Yeah, well, that'll help certainly. So, in this, you're not Steve. You are not alone. Lots and lots and lots of people have got the same problem. Okay, so from Caleb Witt, tried tuning my HIFs. The front carburetor seems to kill the car when I lift the piston, no matter what I do to the rich lean screw. Yeah, that's one of my. I don't like it. I don't like HIFs as much as I like HS carburetors, but it has to do with the float height, maybe. So you gotta open the carburetor up. The other thing with HIFs, and I'll do this next time, is that the chokes themselves leak. Really common to have the choke valve leak, and there's a way to test that. I could say wait till next week, but you've got an inlet on that carburetor, a gasoline inlet, and you've got a vapor line that comes off the float bowl that goes over to the charcoal canister. Take the suction chamber off and the spring out and the piston out. Put a long tube on the vent hole for the overflow, the vent for the carburetor, puff into it, and you get a column of gasoline that shoots up out of the jet 2 feet. So don't have an incandescent light bulb hanging around. Anyway, so now that you've done that, put your index finger on the jet, because you've seen where it comes out of. It's not complicated to understand, but put your finger on it. Now blow so hard you see stars. Don't don't hook up an air gun to it, but blow really, really hard. And if you see gasoline burbling out of one of the holes to the rear of the jet, you got a problem with a rotary choke. And it's extremely common to have that fail. That's a number 10 O-ring, but you got to have it in Viton. So anyway, we'll talk about HIFs next session, but that could be the problem there. So
yeah, I started with the distributor, and as you're going through the car, it was a new acquisition, so you just find problems every time. You know, you're looking, and you know the vacuum advance had been disconnected and plugged across the manifold. That's gone. And actually, Ben at British Auto is sending me a factory fitment back, so it should be in this week. So at least I'll fix that. And at first it wouldn't even run at all without the choke full. So that's all I could do to even start the car or drive it. And then as I was tuning and set the timing as best I could, I have a dial back, so I think I got the timing pretty as good as it's going to be. And then started tuning the carb, and sure enough, I got the idle down to around 1,000, a little higher than 1,000, which was better than it was running on choke, you know. But I'm incrementally getting closer and closer, and just trying to solve all these little problems.
What year is that, Caleb?
It's a 72.
And is the charcoal canister still on the firewall?
Yes, sir.
Okay, disconnect that. Just disconnect the two vent lines from the carburetors and try it then. It should not make one iota of difference whether those lines are hooked up or not. But if you've got a continuously lean problem, it can be that something's funky inside the charcoal canister, and it's putting a vacuum on the float bowl all the time. And you got to have atmospheric pressure on top of the gasoline, so it pushes it down, so it's available to get pushed up the jet. So it could be, I mean, just disconnect those and see if it makes any difference at all. It should make none. If it does, you're on your way. Or it
Okay, sounds good.
So where are you calling from?
North Carolina, Charlotte.
Oh yeah, okay. All right, we got Alan Hendricks there. So he's a Healy guy, but he does the wire wheel stuff.
Oh, okay.
John?
Is that right? Or no, I'm thinking Greensboro.
Greensboro.
Okay, all right, sorry. Yep.
Right down the street.
John?
Yes.
I got another question about float bowl. At least once while I'm driving my GT, I get the distinct smell of gasoline. And I every time I stop the car, I look under there to see if fuel's coming out of the overflow, but obviously by the time I get down there, it's all evaporated and stuff. Would you think that that's a float bowl valve issue, or do I not have the float adjusted properly?
See how this float wiggles?
Yeah.
Well, there's two types of floats. One's got a metal hinge on it.
Right.
And one's got a plastic hinge on it. But the metal hinge gets real wobbly. And I think that what happens sometimes at some RPMs, you're running down the road and the gasoline's sloshing around inside the float bowl, right? And it starts to wiggle this thing at just the right wiggle, and it starts to leak. And then you stop and you get out and you look, nothing wrong, get back in, it's just fine. And then it's usually RPM related, not speed related, but RPM related. But check the hinge on the floats and see if they're wobbly. If they're wobbly, you can squeeze them with a pair of pliers. You squeeze them too much, no problem. You just put a long drill bit or something through there and bend it back out a little bit. You want it as snug as you can. I mean, you can have no interference moving up and down. Like, I mean, it's got to be able to fall, but it should not be so wobbly as this.
Okay, that's a good tip. Thank you.
Right. Okay, Greg Fisher. I have both HIF and HS SUs that I can put in my MGB. I'm restoring. What is your preference? HS. Absolutely. HS. HS. HIFs is just when you get a snag, you got to take them off the car. So Greg, are you still on?
I am.
Okay. All right, so you use the HSs and what year are you putting them on?
It's a 78 that I long since pulled the Stromberg off of, and I had the HSs, and then I procured another MG as a parts car, and it came with the HIFs. It was a 73.
What years are the HSs from? Do you know?
I think it's 67, 68, somewhere in there. I bought them as
These are real early. These are midget carburetors, but the later midget carburetors are the same as the B carburetors. And there's a brass tube that comes in on the side for ventilation that you hook up to the front tappet inspection cover. If you haven't got those brass tubes that come up at 45-degree angles, then you've got to run a Smith's PCV valve on the intake manifold. I was going to bring that tonight and show it, but then I thought it was real nasty, and I've got oil all over my kitchen table as it is, because that dashpot that I was showing was not free of oil. Anyway, you make sure that you mount that with a Smith's PCV valve. So call me tomorrow. I'll take a picture of one and show it to you. I'll be at the shop tomorrow. I got a couple there that I can just FaceTime with you or something.
Sounds good. Thanks, John.
All right. Where are you from, Greg?
Southern California, Marietta, Temecula area.
Oh yeah, it was 100 degrees 3 or 4 days ago.
Yes, it was. It was a little warm here.
So my daughter said she's around Griffith Park in Los Angeles. So Mr. Graboff, let's see. Joe Kirchhoff rebushed and installed new throttle shaft and butterflies. Did a fantastic job at a very reasonable price. I think it's Joe and like one other guy right now. Maybe there's two other guys. So and it's springtime and they're backed up. So yes, but you've got to send it someplace if you can't rebush it yourself. And you can put just new throttle shafts in. But to do the job right, you got to rebush it. So yeah, Joe's excellent. He is the man. And then Pat G, the new dry seal jet assemblies. You asked me that already, Pat. So yeah, and I don't know.
Time will tell, John.
Yep. Robert, do you have a preference between 5-speed versus four-speed with overdrive? He says, I can't respond, so any thoughts are appreciated. So this is Robert's iPad. So, you know, I go for this 4-speed with overdrive anytime because it's original, you know? I mean, I had a guy come up one time, he's got this TC, right? And he says, oh, you gotta drive it. It's like really cool. He's got cycle fenders on it. It's got some sort of Japanese steering box on it. He's got a 5-speed in it. And he said, pretty cool TC. I said, well, how much TC is left here? You know, the thing steers great and the gearbox is wonderful. TCs weren't like that. So I always tend towards originality. That's me. I like the overdrives. But that said, the 5-speed, some of those Japanese 5-speed gearboxes are just, I mean, some of them they've got synchronized in reverse, so you never grind any gears or anything. I mean, they're just great. And you can buy kits, and they have everything in them, and everything's perfect, and they're great. So
that's a Ford gearbox, John.
Oh no,
John, let me. I went up into the mountains with my MGB 2 days ago, and put it in third with the overdrive on the stalk, and it's just a pleasure to drive because you go third and functionally fourth, and then third and functionally fourth with no clutch foot, just instant change, overdrive every time.
Okay, everyone's got an opinion. Yeah, well, that's mine. Although I don't know why there's third overdrive, because third overdrive is the same as fourth. I mean, there's hardly a percentage difference between third overdrive and fourth, but. Anyway.
I like, if I can weigh in on that too, I like the overdrive, and even at third and overdrive, it's a little better than fourth. And we went all the way up, I can't think of the name of the mountain, 11,000 foot pass, and did most of the way in third overdrive, and did not have to slow down. I like it. And I've had it for hundreds of thousands of miles, and it still functions great.
Okay, so, and who started to say that it was a Ford gearbox?
That would be me, John.
Okay.
It's a Ford T9. The high gear conversion uses a Ford T9. The earlier Skyhook conversions used a Datsun gearbox.
Okay. So the Datsun's pretty old.
Yeah.
So
they're
to find
pretty
it,
hard to find.
Yeah. Yeah.
The new ones out there have the Mazda though.
My gut always is that the Japanese boxes are a whole lot better than the Ford gearboxes. So anyway, I go for overdrive. That's what everybody's weighed in on, but you're on an MG site, and what do you expect?
You can't put it in a T-type. You can't put
an overdrive in a T-type. No,
overdrive.
if you want, what you can do on a T-type is you can go to 4.3 gears in the back. You can go to 4.1 is tough. I mean, just hard to find it. In 3.9, I use a 3.9 in my MGA. It's got 15-inch tires. And when I'm at $5,000, I'm doing 90. So, but that's pushing that T-type engine pretty hard. So, yeah. Okay, it must be Lars Tranner, must be on your wife's. So on your wife's computer, one of my two carbs are vented and the other isn't. So anyway, Lars, are you still on? You want to weigh in?
I'm here.
Okay, you got to speak up a little bit though.
Yeah, does it make a difference? Car is running fine.
Well, geez, I don't want to sound too much like Ronald Reagan, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But somehow the engines, is this on an MGB or is this on your MGA or what?
On the MGA.
Well,
LGA.
and you've got the vent on the one carburetor closed off, huh?
There's a hole in the one damper head and not in the other.
Oh, on the damper. Okay, all right. Okay, yes, that does make a difference. So let's take a look. I didn't even talk about that. So here's here's a suction chamber for an H4 or H6. Okay. And we see this little boss on the side here that you've always wondered what it was for. Well, on the real early carburetors, there's a hole drilled on an angle that connects the dash pot to the inside of the carburetor. Almost always, there's a hole in the top of the damper, the AUC 8114. You can see my forehead through the hole on this one. So you have to have a hole. You have to ventilate this. So you have to have a hole, and the hole is either in the damper or it's in here. If you have no holes, it's going to run rich, and if you have two holes, it's going to run rich. You can only have one hole. So the very earliest MGAs had what were called dustless carburetors, and that they were drilled across here, so that when you're crossing the Sahara Desert or something, you didn't get any sand through the little tiny hole. This one's got a hole in it too, although it's harder to see. There it is. So you couldn't get any dirt from there into here, and they were called dustless carburetors. All the Land Rovers have dustless carburetors, so they don't have holes in the top of here. But you either have to have a hole in here or in here, but not neither and not both. So, and it's, you know, since these carburetor suction chambers are the same from 1954, TF, let's go back to TF, TD Mark IIs. They're virtually the same from there through 1974. They're all interchangeable. So some of them have got the holes and some of them don't. So that is something to take a look at. And when you're doing that drop test where I had the tape on the bottom and dropping it, well, let me tell you, if there's a hole through this boss, I mean, it's gonna, I mean, the thing's gonna go lickety split because the air is gonna rush through the boss and into the top of the carburetor. I mean, without the tape on the bottom, you saw how long it took, but without the tape on the bottom, I mean, it just drops out. So that's because the air can get through the bottom, but if it gets through the top, it'll either run rich if it's got no holes, or rich if it's got 2 holes. So you got to take a look inside there, Lars, and see if you got those holes drilled and see if they're the same. As I remember, your MG is a 1600, and that shouldn't have holes in the suction chambers. But you know, this is 60 years later, so you just don't know.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
John?
Yes.
Hi, it's Walter again. Have you or anybody else out there have any issues with neoprene tipped needles and seats sticking closed? I had a couple of cases with clients' cars, and I actually put some old needles and seats, new ones, but old SU needles and seats that I had in stock that were
the steel ones. The steel ones are great until you get one tiny piece of dirt, and then they leak. Right. The advantage of the neoprene, not neoprene, Viton tipped. The Viton. Yeah. So modern gasoline gets sticky. So this is the solution, right? I mean, even on an HIF, except you're hitting it here in the front, and you can. No, I wouldn't hit it with a hammer, with a hard end of the hammer, but you can wail on it with a piece of rubber or plastic and make it work. But I have not seen the Viton ones stick closed. But again, modern gasoline gets sticky, and if the thing's been stored for a bit, then that wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, it was a driven very. But he's got a collection. It had it happen on 3 of his cars. So I put new needles and seats in the Viton tip ones, and it happened again. So I'm sort of at a loss. He doesn't drive the cars often, but my solution was putting original SU needles and seats in, but I'm out of those.
Yeah, those are hard to find now because nobody wants them. There were gross jets. Those were just slick. Those are really, really nice. When the Gross family was making them in Connecticut, but then when they quit making them, guess where they come from now? And they also stick closed.
Yes,
usually the float bowl drains out. When you turn the car off, somehow they leak or evaporates or something in the gasoline level falls. Therefore, the float falls and the needle and seat opens up. Hey, I don't know what to tell you. First time I've heard of that.
Okay, thank you. Maybe somebody else has heard about it.
Yeah. So Ruth Arnold, I'm down to you. I still have 57 new messages. We're not going to get through all of them tonight, that's for sure. But Ruth, are you on yet?
I am indeed.
Okay.
Here's my question. I took my MG to my local garage for an oil change and asked him to take the car to be inspected, which he normally does, and that's fine. But anyway, so he was running late. So I said, well, I'll take her up to the inspection station. So I got up to the inspection station, who's a guy he knows, and everything was fine, except he said, your brake lights aren't working. So I said, oh, that's not so good. Okay. Well, he said, I won't put the rejection sticker on, but everything else is fine. Just go and get that fixed and then come back. So I go back to my guy. I get the brake, and he checked out everything. He fiddled around a bit, and we determined it must be the brake light switch. So I said, okay. So I get the brake light switch, took her in this morning, and the turn signals were working fine. And so then he called me later and said, well, the good news is that she's got through inspection. But he said, now that the windshield wipers aren't working and the turn signals aren't working. And he said, every time I replace the fuse, it blows. So he said, I don't know. We've got to do a lot of, fiddling around. He's not an MG expert by any means at all. He's a good guy. He's a good mechanic. But I just thought maybe you might have some clue I could give him to look for.
My guess is the reason the brake lights didn't work is because the third fuse down in the fuse box had a bad connection, and your turn signals and your wipers didn't work either. You just didn't realize it until.
Well, they absolutely did this morning when I drove her round to him. I absolutely remember that they were.
Prior to getting the brake light switch, when you went to the inspection station, I'm just guessing that the fuse box elected at that moment to have a disconnect. And there's too much corrosion in the fuse box. So the brake lights didn't work. So you went back and your guy fiddled with it and said, well, it must be the switch. So you put in a new switch. Guess where that came from? And it's the switch, which is grounded, and that's what's causing the fuse to blow. So if you still have the original switch, that might still be working.
Okay.
It might have just been the third fuse, which was bad to start with. So, fuse box maintenance is important too. We had this service at our shop called a complete lubrication. And one of the 100 things that we did was pull all the wires off the fuse box, take the fuse box off the car, sandblast it, pinch all the little terminals back together, put it back in the car, right side up. Because if you put it upside down, then you start the car and you can't turn it off. So it's really easy to tell you there's something wrong. And that is just fuse box maintenance. And hardly anyone does any electrical maintenance at all. That's my guess. What happened is that he misdiagnosed.
I did suggest to him, I said, have you tried moving all the fuses around in the box? Because sometimes he said, no, it's not that, But that's a great tip, John. Thank you very much. I'll suggest that to him.
And I know other people have had trouble with new brake light switches.
Okay.
John.
Hey, thank you very much.
I'd like to chime in on that. For some reason, my horn stopped working. Everything else worked. And I'm looking around and I noticed that the little clip holding one end of the fuse had splayed out, and the fuse was just making enough contact. As soon as I pieced those back together again, got a good snug fit, horn started working again.
Okay, great.
Fuse box maintenance.
I was going to comment, John, that I bought a new fuse box a couple of years ago when my dad gave me his 78 MGB, because I saw that there was actually a plastic piece missing from the third fuse, which is why I had all those same symptoms. And I noticed after about a year, it was problematic. And I took out the new fuses, put in the old fuses that were 35 years old, worked like a charm. Turns out, I think some of the replacement fuse boxes they sell now, those clips are a little too wide. And so you just pinch them closed and you're fine.
Yep. Cleanliness. Yep. I tell people all the time, just take the fuse box off the car, just take a picture of it first, so you know where all the wires go, even though not necessarily they go in the right place, but at least it was working, to start off with. And take it out. If you don't have a sandblaster, put it in the kitchen and put it in a jar of ammonia, and that'll clean it up. Or use your kid's toothbrush and some Brasso or something or other, and just clean it up, and then it'll be great. So, and Ruth is calling from the greater Washington, D.C. area.
Yeah, I missed your session the other night when you were with the MG Car Club.
Oh,
and I had something else on that night, so I couldn't, but I gather it was well attended and
It was
very
lots
much
of fun.
appreciated. Yeah.
Ruth is talking about, I'm happy to do a private session for a club, so that there aren't 134 people on, so we do answer all the questions, because I still have 57 new messages. We're going to go on for a little bit here. But if your club's interested in doing a session, get in touch and we can work something out. So Eric Gebhardt, are you going to be updating your webpage with events? Well, I hope so. I hope so. There's only so much. I can't do it myself, and my daughter does it. And yeah, all right. Thank you for reminding me. It's another embarrassing thing. All right, Greg Fisher. Yeah, HS4s, absolutely, absolutely. David Massey. Oh, look at this, Wheels Across the Pond, April 16th, Jupiter, Florida. 450 cars registered. David, are you still on? David Massey?
Yeah.
So this is an all British event, or European, or?
Everything from across the pond. There are Volkswagens, but Land Rovers, Jaguar, MG,
Okay.
50 different classes, and it's also motorcycles.
Okay. Very
They
cool.
haven't held it for 2 years, but it's been a 300 usually, so we're getting a big turnout.
All right, Bob and Gloria, there's a place you can go.
It always is the Saturday before Easter. It moves.
Oh, all right, okay. All right, a movable feast. All right.
Yes.
Okay. And you're from Jupiter around there? Or?
Fort Lauderdale.
Okay.
Plantation.
All right. All right, thank you. Rob,
Thanks,
on his
John.
iPhone, when did you say you were going to the Washington, D.C. area? I didn't. Well, I am going, but I don't know when. It's either going to be May or it's going to be June. I'm not sure. So from Judd, Galabrar, Greenville, South Carolina, British Games, British Car Show, May 28th, Furman University campus. Yep, I missed that. I was down there like 6 or 7 years ago for my niece's wedding, and nothing much was going on Friday, or on Saturday, and then the next day we drive someplace and hear the remnants of a British car show that was like a mile away from me. I couldn't believe that I missed it at Furman. Yeah. Pat G. I like dual carburetors when they try to shoot each other. Okay, that's good. All right, Robert Moran, my TD runs very rich, and the mixture causes large pops in the tailpipe. Yep, I hesitate to try to start the car, and I'm hoping there's a static way to check the distributor. Well, yes. If you're getting, are you still on, Robert Moran?
I am.
Okay, all right, so if you've got backfires, literally it sounds like a rifle shot down the tailpipe, that's a textbook case of a bad condenser. So Glenn at Glenn's MG service in St. Petersburg, Florida said, they've been making automotive condensers for over 100 years, but about 5 years ago, they forgot how to. But I think that had to do more with where they're being made. So you've just got to change the condenser. This is my guess. This is my guess. And then you cannot check the condenser. If you've got an ohm meter, you can check the condenser. You can tell if it's bad, but you can't tell if it's good. Does that make any sense? So you got the condenser. Say this is a condenser. I know this is an AUC 8114 damper, but you take your ohm meter and you put it on both ends of there. This is a moving coil ohm meter, and the needle just flicks. It just flicks because electricity tries to surge into it and then can't continue to go anywhere. And then you turn it over, you turn the connections and connect it up the opposite way, and the needle flicks again. and then you know that it might be good, but you don't know if it's bad. If it doesn't flick at all, it's bad. If it's continuous, it's bad. Because
John, I have a new condenser, or a relatively new, it's a year old, but I haven't driven the car that much. So let's assume the condenser is okay.
No.
Back to my question and your original comment earlier on, where you say, always check your distributor and assume that's the problem before you start fooling with your carburetors. Is there any way I can check the distributor without this huge backfire going on?
No, just by checking the condenser. And you can do that. You can do that if you have a moving. I just get another condenser. Is your condenser on the plate, or is it screwed in with a single screw?
It's screwed in with a single screw inside.
Buy another one and put it in. Just do it.
Okay, I'll go with that. I'll go with that idea. Thank you very much.
Because one out of 4 new condensers is faulty. You may get another faulty one.
Okay, I got an ohmmeter. I'll check everything you said. Thank you.
If you want to call me tomorrow, I can explain it in more detail. But it has to do with connecting it one way and then the other way. And if it's continuous, I mean, it's scrap. And if the needle doesn't flick at all, it's scrap. But the needle on the ohmmeter should just flick when you hook it up one way, and then flip it over and it flicks again. So
I'll check it out. Thank you.
Okay. Mark Vitalin, in the summer, 20 to 30 Celsius temperatures, what is the usual mileage for refill or top up on the damper on the dash pot? And it's 0, because once it's filled up, it should stay filled up. Now, if when you go to push this into the piston, if you filled this dash pot all the way up to the very top, then over the next several miles, several weeks or something, that oil is going to spill out of there until it reaches a correct level. And when you go to put the damper in, you should hit oil about right there. Okay, about right there. That's where you should feel it. And since the oil can't go anywhere, you don't need to refill it. It's not true on a Stromberg. Strombergs you got to fill all the time. That's a different animal. But our SU is just as long as you hit restriction right before you hit the threads, as long as you hit oil restriction. And again, I'd use 90 weight. So Moss sells some damper oil, which is lighter weight stuff. I think it's too light. I wouldn't recognize using it. If you like the bottle from Moss, get the Moss bottle, but then pour the oil out or put it in your engine or something, and then put some 90 weight in there. So are you still on, Mark? We're down to 100.
Yeah, I am.
Where are you calling from?
Ottawa, Canada.
Oh, all right. Okay.
That's good to know. I have a mechanic that says you should check them routinely and always keep them topped up.
Well, you end up overfilling them, and then you wonder why you got to fill them back up again. But as long as you got restriction, just before you hit the threads, you're home free.
Okay. And if I were to replace for a heavier one, can I just top up adding the heavier to it, or do I need to
Oh
drain them?
yeah, sure. That'll mix it up. You know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. Pat G. Gear oil. If it's backfiring on acceleration, then experiment with thicker oil. Yes. The dashpot oil from SU is like 3-in-1. Yeah, I wouldn't even start with thin. I'd just go thicker. Ben Cummings in Alabama, Southern British Car Club, enjoyed having you at our meeting in February. I do travel, and when I travel, I like to go to a meeting here and there because it's just fun, you know, so like to have you again next year when you come back to Gulf Shores. So, and maybe we can have a tech session down there at the Garage Mahal. You got it. Yep, let's just plan on it. So, okay, Ben, thank you very much. Thank you for buying me dinner. It was very nice. Mark, what about running a little bit of sea foam through the fuel system a couple times a year? You know, there are people that just swear up and down that that's the best stuff to use. I've never used it. I can't even say. But apparently, I mean, I haven't heard anything bad about it. And I've heard people say, oh my gosh, it's done all this great stuff. So why would they call it sea foam? I mean, I'm put off by the name, but hey, what if it works? You know, if it works, you know, do it. Let's see. Anybody have, here we go, anybody have any suggestion on how to remove the bolts on an ignition switch? Trying to remove the entire switch. So the 68 through 80, well, no, not 68, 70 through 80, they have these bolts that are called shear bolts. And the bolts, the shank of the bolt isn't straight up. It goes down to a real small diameter, and you tighten up the bolt and you get it so tight, snap. It snaps off. Now it's in place and you can't get it apart again. It's like the like those backwards screws that you see in bathroom stalls in the airport. Anyway, tighten these things up and they snap off. So how do you get it apart? There's two ways to do it, two real easy ways. One is to take a hacksaw blade, take the end of the bolt, cut a slot in it. That means you got to take a hacksaw blade and snap it off and hold it in a pair of vice grips. And then take your screwdriver and put the screwdriver down in the slot and it'll just unscrew. It's a real coarse thread. The other way is to use a prick punch and a hammer and just on the outside circumference, and you take your prick punch, the hammer, tongue, and roll it and start to get it. Once you get it a quarter of a turn, you can turn it by hand. The only danger is that the dashboard's right there, or not the dashboard, the windshield, the windscreen is right there. And you would not want to hit the windscreen with the hammer. So if you're going to use a hammer, just be careful. So that's, and then when you put the new switch in, don't snap the bolt off. Don't snap it off. You know, just snug it up, and so that when you have to take it off again, you can just unscrew it. And Martin Heisel, try using a rotary Dremel and make a screwdriver slot. So yeah, you could use a screwdriver Dremel to make that in there. So okay, so Pat G, the absolutely best book on SU carburetors is the Speed Sport book, SU High Performance Tuning. Yes, I've got several copies of that, and it has all the needles and all the needle charts, and it's a Speed Sport. Exactly. So I've got several in the bookshelf in the other room, and I'd run in there and show it to you, but you can believe that I actually have them. All right. So let's see. Neil Bryden, what about adding a bit of oil to the gasoline like is done with older outboard marine engines?
Only if you want to do skywriting and make smoke.
Okay. Well, Marvel Mystery Oil, you know, the Marvel Mystery Oil, that was the deal. You put it, you know, you put some in the gas tank. You can't do this to modern cars because they're all designed for, you know, they've got platinum plugs and they're all designed to run on exactly the right stuff and everything. But I have heard of people adding oil to gasoline. But again, it's not a 2-cycle, and I don't know if that would make the gasoline less sticky. If we're talking about when you're storing the car, you can make a case of disconnecting the fuel pump and running the engine until the carburetors are empty. That's a possibility. And the floats fall down, and there's no way that they're gonna stick closed. They might, on the other hand, stick open. Here we go. Bill Baumer, I'm installing a new wire harness to my 74.5 BGT, and I noticed a few wires have a small marker on the wire like heat shrink. Red wire has a black marker and a yellow wire with an orange marker. Are they there for a reason? Are you still on, Bill?
Yeah, hi, John. Hi, yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so at the fuse box, you might find red wires with a black marker on them. Because you've got one fuse feeds the right side of the car and one fuse feeds the left side of the car. Although sometimes they feed them cross. So if you lose one taillight, you're not going to lose all your taillights, right? You only lose taillights on one side. So that was done when they're wrapping the loom, so they can keep track of which wires which, because they're both red, so they don't end up putting both the rear and both the front on the same fuse or something. But I don't know about the other wire. I don't know. A yellow wire is an overdrive wire.
Right.
Straight yellow. But I don't know why that would have the orange marker on a 74.
Yeah, it's just a little orange piece about 3/16 of an inch long, like a yellow or orange. Yeah, I mean, I'm just following it, hooking it back up the way it was. So
sure.
Right. Yeah, I did the I bead blasted my fuse box today, and it came out like brand new.
Great.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Do you have overdrive?
Yes. Yeah.
Make sure you fuse that overdrive circuit.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I cut that from before in the discussion. I will.
Okay. Good.
Great. Thank you.
Rob, on his iPhone, any tricks to getting a caliper bleeder screw out if the head broke off? Just offhand, no. Get another caliper. There's lots of them out there, but let's say that you can't do that. So you have to heat it up. You have to get it really hot with an oxy-settling torch. I mean, that kind of hot. And then you have to drive something into the center of the screw. Maybe you got to drill it out a little bit first. There are such things called easy outs, but it's almost always fake. There aren't such things as easy outs, or they certainly aren't easy. But here's a situation where it might work. So you drill a hole out in the center of the bleeder, and so it'll take an easy out, and then you heat it up. I mean, you got to heat it up where it's cherry red hot. And then you take that easy out and drive it in a little bit into that bleeder, and then see if you can turn the easy out and get the bleeder to come out. But I just get another caliper, and those are different left and right. But that's the trick, of course. Now that it's broken, the trick is never to break off a bleeder, right? Use the heat first, because you can get the. Are you still on, Rob? We're down to.
Yep, I'm here.
Oh, okay, all right. So, where are you calling from, Rob?
I'm calling from just outside Durham, North Carolina.
Oh, there's lots and lots and lots of MGs out there. Somebody will have that. Somebody will have another caliper.
Well, I've got a couple MGs. The one I broke the screw off is an XKE rear caliper.
Oh. Well, now we're into some money.
And it's a nightmare to get to, right? You got to drop the entire rear end.
Oh my God, really? Just to take that puck off there, you got to get the whole thing, really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So, you know, White Post Restoration, White Post, Virginia does a lot of that stuff. You send it to them, they get it apart for you. I mean, you know,
Okay.
with a charge card.
I'm sure they will, yeah.
Yep. So, well, good luck with that. Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
So David, to everybody, did anyone write down the name for the carb parts? joesomething.com, Joe Curto, C-U-R-T-O, joecurto.com, the SU Carburetor King. And somebody else has already, other people have put in here. And his, the trade name of his parts are British Superior, BritishSuperior.com. So here we go, brakes. Okay, from McCam Insurance to everybody. I had front brakes replaced. Now they start to squeal after a few minutes of driving. What to do next when we already talked about the pads from AutoZone.
Yeah, that was me, John. Sorry, that was Rory.
That's okay. That's all right.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Okay, any thoughts on ignition timing at higher altitudes? So I'm in Salt Lake City, 4,000 feet in the valley, more in the hills. Should I be changing from factory specs? I don't know. I know if you put a supercharger on the car, you got to back off the timing because I don't know why. Because that's you have to. But I really don't know a lot more about it than that. But if you're in Salt Lake City at 4,000 feet, David, are you still on? David gave up. We're down to 98 people because it's about 9:30.
John, for the timing for high altitude, a lot of gas stations in the past used to advance your timing for going up in a high altitude.
Really?
And that seems to work. I never did that.
I was going to say to call Paul Deershaw at Sports Car Craftsman, because he's in Denver, Colorado, and that's 6,000 feet. So he knows what to do there.
Find a pilot and ask them what they do on their airplanes.
Say again, Judd?
Find a pilot that's flying an old reciprocating engine airplane and ask him what he does when he goes up to altitude.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I would suggest the mixture.
Well, that's what usually you lean it out, but you know, you get the lean needles because you're up higher, but I don't know.
Yeah, but I've never heard of changing the timing because of altitude.
Neither, but you know, all of a sudden it's like I can't say because I don't know. I don't live out there. I don't know, and I do know that you change it with a supercharger, and that's you got more.
Yeah, that's like going down into Death Valley.
Yep. Anybody know how to revitalize ChemTool Carb Dip? I can only use it for one set of carburetors before it gets weak. I use lacquer thinner. You can buy lacquer thinner cheap. Lacquer thinner is almost as good as gasoline in taking stuff off. And in fact, it works better, and it's I don't know if it's any safer. I don't know what the flash point is, but so this is by Pat to everybody. ChemTool Carb Dip, I don't know. Denny to everybody, how do you know if you have the correct mixture? By lifting that air piston, right? By lifting the air piston just a little bit and judging the change in RPM. Pat G, boy, does Jeff at Advanced Distributor disagree with the 32 at high speed timing? Yeah, we all have our, you know, but that's, you talk to the race car drivers and they're running at 32. And I tell you, it's 32 degrees is, we had a guy, Carl Heidemann, and I did a seminar called Tuning for Speed. And we had a guy come from, I've told the story before, we had a guy drive from Hershey, Pennsylvania to Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's 800 miles in a 67B. the first thing you do when you're tuning for speed is make your car with its existing setup run as well as it possibly can. So we went through and did a whole tune-up the first day. Before we attended to the timing, changed the timing, we checked to see what the timing was. It was 27 degrees before top dead center. Okay, that's what we found it. He drove from Hershey, PA to Grand Rapids at 27 before. So I changed it to 32. The next day we went to the dynamometer. We put it on the dyno. It got 62 horsepower. Is that all? Yeah, that's
At the
all.
wheels.
That's great. That's great. That's what they get at the rear wheels. So we set the timing back to 27. We lost 5 horsepower. Okay, so anyway, there are professional disagreements. You know, say you just got to go with whoever seems to make the most sense. Okay, so here's Denny to everybody. How do you measure 32 degrees? My engine only has 4 notches. Denny, are you still on? We still got a handsome crowd out here. We got 95 people, but Denny doesn't appear to still be here. But if you got the marks at the bottom, the 4 marks at the bottom, 15, 10, 5, and 0, you can't get there from here. You cannot do it. You have to have a dial back timing light. And when you go to Napa to buy a dial back timing light, the kid on the front counter's never heard of one, but they still have one hanging on a hook someplace. If you got a 73 through 80 MGB, 72 through 80, the timing marks are up on the top, and there's 5 of them. There's 5 of them. So the pulley's coming around, and it's wait a minute. I'm trying to. It's like working in a mirror here. The front pulley's going clockwise, right? So it comes in, the first mark it comes to is 20, and then 15, 10, 5, and 0. And the last mark that the pulley comes to is 0. So you turn the pulley around until it's at 12 degrees before top dead center, okay? And you put a new mark on the pulley opposite the 0 mark. Now that mark is 12 degrees before top dead center. The new mark on there. If you bring the thing around and put the real timing mark here, that mark is over here. So it's that new mark you've made with paint pencil or something is at 12 before, because you put the real notch here. You used the paint pencil and made a new mark on the front pulley. So that's 12 degrees before top dead center. Now you get a standard timing light. And when it's running, you rev it all the way up, and you want it, that new mark, that painted mark, you want it opposite of 20, because 12 plus 20 equals 32.
So along those lines, what speed do you have to get up to before you hit full mechanical advance?
You watch the timing mark. You watch the timing mark, and when it stops moving as you're accelerating, that's full mechanical advance. So, you know, I do this by myself. I got my gun in my right hand. I'm reaching across the engine with my left hand. I rev it up until the timing mark stops advancing. That's full mechanical advance. It's usually around 3,000-4,000 RPM. Now, Pat G says, buy an O2 sensor. Forget the color tune. The O2 sensor, you got to weld a bung into the exhaust, and then you got to get an O2 sensor, and you got to get a meter on your dash, and yeah, that is the way, absolutely. So here's Scott Lynn was reading some old issues of the Sacred Octagon, which is the official organ of the New England MGT Register. And if you really want to fix a problem with a fuel pump, is install a facet pump, F-A-C-E-T. Facet pumps are great. They're wonderful. They always run, but if you can isolate it someplace you can't hear it, facet pumps should push, not pull. So it should be located somewhere towards the rear of the car, but they all, the facet pumps are great. I mean, I always use SU pumps, although on my MGA, I've got a dual solenoid pump. So it's got a single body in the middle, but it's got a solenoid on both ends. So I got twice the chance of failure, right? So anyway, it's got a solenoid on both ends. Jags use that.
So that was specifically for vapor lock?
No, that was to make sure the reason my using two fuel pumps, a dual fuel pump, is so that when one side of it fails, I still got the other. So I'm not off the road. But vapor lock true vapor lock occurs between the tank and the pump. And the pump can't suck the fuel out of the tank because it isn't fuel anymore, it's vapor. And so vapor lock doesn't occur on the other side of the pump because it's under pressure. But you can have boiling gasoline in the carburetors, and that is a problem. That's a real problem, and that's what almost all the problems that we're having. A Midget 1500 has a mechanical fuel pump on the side of the engine, and the fuel line runs over the top of the gearbox. So let me tell you, in Michigan, even in August, you get vapor lock. That is absolutely true. But that's the only car, the Midget 1500, 75 through 79. That's the only car that actually gets vapor lock. So, I mean, to use the exact correct words. Let's see. Pat G's weighing in again to get the to use a factory manifold. And Scott Lynn said that he jet hot coated his exhaust manifold on his TD, and it definitely helped, but it didn't fix all the problems. Boiling gasoline, I mean, modern gasoline boils at such a low temperature. I mean, it's such a low temperature compared, because of the alcohol in it. So that, you know, if you buy the gasoline without the alcohol, you get rid of the problem, or most of the problem. But sometimes you can't, know it's a hassle. You can't do it. You just want to get the regular gas. So on a TD, you can get those socks that fit around the float bowls. That helps. And you can also buy a heat shield. There is no heat shield on a TD to keep the radiant heat from the manifold from getting to the float bowls. And what usually happens is that you shut the car off. If you got a temp gauge, right, like an MGA, early B, T-types, you know, you shut the car off and that temp gauge just goes right up, you know. I mean, it just is, just as it takes time for the engine to warm up, it takes time for the engine to cool down. But before it cools down, it takes all the heat that was in it, and since it's no longer going through the radiator, the whole system just skyrockets. And that causes the gasoline to boil. And as soon as the temperature comes back down, the car runs just great again. So. Gil Dupree says that HIFs don't seem to have the boiling problem, but maybe they don't as much, because the jet is compensated, but I don't. Now here, Pat G says he loves HIFs. Everyone's got their own opinion. So here we go. Here's one. Gil Dupree. How do you stop an overdrive filter gasket from leaking? The problem is how the filter gaskets are made. Now there's a piece of screen, and there's a paper gasket on top and a paper gasket on the bottom, and the oil wicks through that screen. The original filters, there was some sealant between the paper and the screen, and so I think it's the modern ones that are the problem. But you can always use some ultra black or the right stuff, both of them made by Permatex. That'll help. Doug Wolfire, what's the best way to change a fuel pump without getting doused in gasoline? So you want to disconnect the line at the tank first. Disconnect that line, then at least you're only getting doused with the fuel that's in the line. And gasoline loves soft body parts. It loves underarms because you got your arm extended, right? And the gasoline runs right up into your underarm. And that really, there's only one part of your body that hurts more when you get gasoline on it. Anyway, so the trick is to disconnect the fuel line at the tank first, and then crack the line loose and let it drip. We're at 9:35, and we got through. Look at that! I got to the end. I think I got to the end of the messages. So we still have 81 people on. Thank you very kindly for hanging on for so long. Go to my website, press that PayPal button, help me out. And if you've got a question and you want to know something more that we didn't cover, or something more in detail, give me a call. Tomorrow I'll be at my shop tomorrow until, I don't know, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We got a club meeting tomorrow night. And I'll be happy to, I'm always happy to FaceTime with you. If you got an iPhone, sometimes if I look at something, listening doesn't help. Let me tell you, there's that thing they call the martini effect. And I don't know what effect there is, but when I used to have people say, well, just listen to my engine on a telephone, you go, hey, it's just noise. It's just noise. You really can't tell, but I can look and I can see. So things like fuse boxes or wiring or things that you might have jammed up,
What is your website, John?
It's University Motors Ltd.com. University Motors. God, it's like we're working on a mirror here. University Motors Ltd.com. And Doug, who's our official counter, has given me the official count tonight. That's the maximum people who were on, was 182. That's higher than normal, but that's because we're talking about SUs. So, and I think we'll talk about HIFs maybe next time, or Strombergs, or both, or something. So anyway, Jim, you want to say something about Jim Pastor? You want to say something about your event?
Sure. Sorry, I had to leave for a while.
I didn't. I mean, I'm looking at everybody in little postage stamp sizes, and I've only got one screen up here. There's a couple more screens after this one. So.
Sure, we can hit it again. Actually, John's been gracious to come here to Altoona for how many years now, John? I don't know, 17, 18 years, maybe?
Long time, yep.
I mean, a long time. We have a car show in August. But years ago, we set up a little seminar where we do it on Thursday and Friday before our event, which is a Saturday, Sunday. And we work here at my garage. I have a lift, and seems like all the tools that we need, or else John brings what he needs. And every year we do a different topic. So we've done carburetors. I know you were talking about carburetors, and I'm thinking, how many times do we do carburetors with 15 guys sitting at tables?
Actually, it's a workshop. We rebuild them. The guys bring their carburetors, and we rebush them and put them together and so forth. We build engines. We built engines 2 different times. We built an engine and started it up on the bench in Jim's garage. So.
Yeah, that's so every year, mostly attended by our club members. We usually take, it depends on what we're doing. Taking more than 20 people is really hard because you just don't get to see, a whole lot. So I think we're at 16 right now, John. So we have a couple spaces available. If anyone's interested in more information, it is August 20, whatever that Thursday is in August, the 20th. I'm going to look here real quick, if you can hold on just a moment.
If you're interested, you can contact me.
Yeah, it's the 25th, 26th.
or you can find Jim also if you go to the Central Pennsylvania British Car Fest.
Yeah, and my email address is real simple, guys. It's mgnut@atlanticbb.net. That's BB as in broadband. So if anyone has any questions, would like to have more information on it, they can, and we'll mention it again.
This year we're doing some front suspension work.
Yeah, we're going to do front suspension on a late model B, get to the rear end probably, and usually because there'll be 15 to 20 guys here with cars, there's always somebody says, hey, can you take a look at this? And then we get into something else. So it's always been a great draw, and John stays for the weekend, and we do a little road trip on
It's
Saturday.
really, I mean, I'm from Michigan, and the planner, the engineers and the planners got here before the people did, and they took a grid and snapped it straight across the state. Every single road and avenue and street in the state of Michigan is a straight line that goes on forever. But in Pennsylvania, in Altoona, Pennsylvania, you can't go more than a quarter mile before you got to weave or turn or something or other. So that it's beautiful driving roads. Oh my gosh, it's beautiful.
All buggy roads.
Well, there are buggies. Yeah. Yeah, lots of Amish out there. So
yeah. So if anyone has any information, and I'll be on another call, I guess, in a couple of weeks, and
right.
we'll give you an update on how many people, but we do have a couple spaces left before it will become uncomfortable. So cool.
Okie doke. Well, ladies, gentlemen, thank you very kindly for weighing.
Thanks, John. Good night.
From all over, and we had a good time. I had a good time. So it's 2 hours and 45 minutes. That's pushing it. And we had 182. Would you do a session on a downdraft Weber, Bill Baumer? Oh, I suppose I could. Don't like it much, and I don't have one to bring in but I'll talk about it. Sure. Cleanliness. Let me tell you, cleanliness is where it's at. And Pierce Manifolds, they're the guys that sell all the Webers and sell the manifolds, and they're the people that have all the parts and know their stuff. Pierce Manifolds in the greater Los Angeles area, I think. They are the place to go to get all those parts. Whereas Joe Curto's the SU guy. So
I like what you said. Weber makes good grills.
Okay. Yeah, we can have Bob and Gloria do a seminar on how to cook on your MG on long trips.
Yeah.
You got to wrap it in enough foil so that you don't pick up smelly engine.
Three layers of aluminum foil.
You just have to be careful when you're taking out the aluminum foil that you don't hit the alternator. Then you get a good zap.
Anyway, thank you very, very kindly. And
thanks, John.
Yep.
Thank you, John.
It's always great.
David, yep, thank you.
Thanks, John.
Yep, Ron Nugent, nice to see you.
Thanks,
Crystal,
John. Good night.
Doug, thank you for counting tonight. It was very kind to hang on all this time. Doug Clark from Chicago. So thank you very kindly.
Thanks, John.
Yep.
Thanks, John. Good night.
Thank you, John. Good to see you.
Tom Weisel, nice to see you. Thanks for Joe. We got Tom Weisel and Martin Heisel. So
hey,
you guys
no relation.
You guys must be cousins. Yeah. Right.
John, it was good to see you, John, at the swap meet last month. That was a good turnout too. It was a good turnout. A lot of people came.
Yep, it was very nice. The Chicagoland British car swap meet. They have another one coming up, not as intense as the one just ahead, but there's one at Harper Community College. Usually the weekend after
Labor Day. They call it the British Car Union Festival. All the British car clubs put it on. First Sunday after Labor Day.
Okay. All right. Okay.
So John, who's your Zena Stromberg guy? Who do you recommend for Zena Stromberg's?
I usually do them. You know, I don't know anybody that's not like Joe Curto or Pierce for the, you know, I don't know anybody that's really excellent on. I'd say I do them, but I got a couple of projects and I've got to get them done before I take on anything else. So maybe
Okay.
next year I'll do some. So
It depends on where you're at, but Steve Shivington does Stromberg's really well.
I know how to get in touch with Steve. So if you want to get the information from me, I can pass you along. So. Okay.
Yeah, he taught us how to do them.
Have a good evening, John.
Thanks, John. I appreciate the help.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. all.